Amid the darkest pages of human history, there lies a small, unassuming name, yet it carries enough power to decide the fate of empires, topple tyrants, and silence those who hold the greatest secrets of their time. Cyanide, a molecule that seems so simple, yet is stained with the colors of art, war, espionage, and collective tragedy. In today's video, we will open the door to the complete journey of one of the most terrifying poisons ever known, from its accidental birth within the deep blue of Prussian Blue, to its transformation into the weapon of spies, the talisman of tyrants, and the haunting shadow that lingers over humanity. You will discover why a breath of gas as thin as mist could make entire power structures tremble. Why brilliant chemists who revered it also feared it. And why cyanide, despite its reputation as instant death, still plays a vital role in industry, medicine, and forensic science. If you are ready to step into a story that is at once beautiful and cruel, scientific and haunting, then let this gentle narration lead you deeper into the mystery of cyanide, the deadly substance that reshaped human history in ways no one ever expected. And as we gently close the door of the opening chapter, where cyanide appeared as a symbol of power, fear, and tragedy, the true journey begins somewhere entirely different. Not in a laboratory, not on a battlefield, not in the bunkers of dictators, but in a modest little dye workshop tucked in the heart of early 18th century Berlin. A place no one would ever expect to give birth to an entire chemical empire, and to sow the very first seed of the most infamous poison in human history. When we look back at the history of chemistry, few would imagine that a great discovery began with a mistake. Among old wooden barrels, steaming kettles, and the pungent smell of ammonia that filled the dye houses of that time, a mixing accident unintentionally created an entirely new shade of blue, Prussian blue. A deep, muted blue, carrying the feeling of being able to swallow light itself. It was not as radiant as ultramarine made from precious lapis lazuli, but it was far more durable, far cheaper, and much easier to produce. Prussian blue quickly conquered the European art world. In Turner's paintings, it stretched across the canvas like the infinite depth of a stormy sky. Under Constable's brush, that blue became the soul of vast countryside landscapes. It appeared quietly, yet powerfully, enough to change the way people understood color. And then, like a breeze crossing oceans, this blue reached Japan, weaving itself into ukiyo-e woodblock prints. In Hokusai's The Great Wave, Prussian blue surges through the waves, so vivid it feels as if the sea itself is breathing. But the interesting part was not how beautiful the color looked, it was the revolution it unleashed. From fine art to military uniforms, from royal courts to everyday goods, Prussian blue became the color of civilization and modernity. It was cheap, stable, and widespread to the point one could call it the blue of its era. Yet behind that beauty, chemists discovered something no artist had ever imagined. Hidden within that dazzling blue was an unnamed seed of poison. The truth lay right in the structure of Prussian blue, a compound containing carbon-nitrogen bonds, the very precursors of cyanide. And the moment humanity realized that each tiny particle of pigment held a deadly secret, history quietly shifted onto a completely new path. The discovery of Prussian blue was like opening a great gate into the age of modern chemistry. But at the time, no one knew they were standing before a mysterious Rubik's Cube. Stunningly beautiful, yet easily transformable into one of the most dangerous weapons ever known. This made Prussian blue a peculiar entity in history, both an icon of art and the seed of death. What is remarkable is that this accident awakened a deeper curiosity about the hidden world within every drop of pigment. Chemists of the 18th century began to wonder, what made this blue so durable? Why did it behave strangely when heated? And what exactly was the mist-like vapor that rose during its processing? That curiosity turned a mere dye-mixing accident into the first step of a far larger journey. Each time they analyzed, burned, or treated Prussian blue was another step closer to a secret that history still trembles to recall. And so, from a humble dye workshop, humanity took its first steps toward cyanide. The poison clutched tightly by spies, used by tyrants as their escape route, and remembered as the haunting shadow that lingered over civilizations for centuries. If we look deeper into that moment, when a color was born unconsciously in the chaos of chemicals, we realize this was more than a discovery. It was a crossroads of art, science, and destiny. A small event that brought consequences no one could foresee. From Scheele's laboratory to the gold mines of Johannesburg, from the sealed interrogation rooms of the Gestapo to the trembling hands of a spy in the cold night. All of it, as if scripted long before, began with that single shade of blue. Prussian blue, with all its quiet beauty, resembles a memory resting at the bottom of the ocean. Silent, profound, seemingly harmless. But once stirred by human curiosity, it awakened a sleeping creature. Not because it wished to harm, but because human knowledge had accidentally brushed against the deep power hidden within its structure. And that is the first paradox of cyanide. It was born from beauty, but remembered for death. Looking back, it is almost unbelievable that an entire chain of historical tragedies, from gas chambers, poisonings, to the suicide talismans of tyrants, can all be traced back to one small, unnoticed moment in a dye workshop. A moment so quiet, yet carrying consequences that shaped the next 3 centuries. Prussian blue did not just give birth to the color industry, it became the starting point for one of the strangest stories in chemical history, the story of how a single molecule could nourish beauty and nourish death, could be a symbol of creativity and, at the same time, the foundation of one of toxicology's greatest mysteries. We often think history evolves through grand inventions and sparkling milestones. But sometimes, it is the small accidents, the unexpected moments, that create the true turning points. And this shade of blue, the shade born from an unintended mistake, did exactly that. As part 1 comes to a close, we are not just looking at a color. We are looking at a seed, sown by chance, nurtured by science, and blossoming into a story both beautiful and shadowed. And from this seed, the next chapter will take you to the decisive moment. When chemists first isolated the toxic vapor hidden within that blue, hydrogen cyanide, a clear liquid with the scent of bitter almonds, and the doorway to an entire dark chapter of history that followed. Prepare yourself. For this is only the beginning of the cyanide journey. From the moment humanity discovered that beneath the deep beauty of Prussian blue lay an unnamed secret, the world of chemistry seemed to step into a new labyrinth. Unanswered questions drifted quietly in the air. What created that blue? What was the strange vapor released when it was heated? And most importantly, did something dangerous exist within that very beauty? It was curiosity itself that led scientists to a decisive turning point, where the accidents of art gave way to the deliberate investigations of the laboratory. In the early 18th and 19th centuries, the atmosphere inside European laboratories carried a feeling that was both chaotic and sacred. It was an era when chemists were endlessly fascinated by everything around them, minerals, plants, pigments, the strange gases released during combustion. And in that very setting, Carl Wilhelm Scheele, one of the most brilliant chemists of his time, stepped into history with a discovery that carried the breath of both beauty and death. Scheele was not the first to see Prussian blue, but he was the first to question it deeply enough to break its structure apart. While artists cared only about how beautiful the color looked, Scheele wanted to know why it existed, what it was made of, and why it reacted so strangely. His curiosity drove him toward bold experiments, heating Prussian blue, burning it, breaking it down under different conditions. And then, during one of those high-temperature heating experiments, something strange happened. From the molten pigment, a delicate, almost invisible vapor began to rise. It had no color, disappearing quickly like a ghost. But its smell lingered with a haunting sharpness, the scent of bitter almonds. A faint, cutting aroma, as if it could slice through the air itself. Scheele realized he had found an entirely new substance. An acid unlike any he had ever encountered. At first, he named it plainly and practically, the acid of Prussian blue, prussic acid. But as scientists continued to study it, they realized its properties far exceeded the realm of pigment. And because the pigment's name came from the Greek word kyanos, meaning deep blue, they gave the new compound a name that echoed its origin, cyanide. A name both lovely and cold. As if born precisely from the tension between color and death. Hydrogen cyanide, HCN, in the raw form Scheele discovered, was a clear, almost elegant liquid when seen by the naked eye. But behind that clarity lay a merciless truth: even a tiny amount entering the body could stop a person's breathing within minutes. While the surrounding air remained full of oxygen. A terrifying paradox, suffocation beneath an intact sky. What made hydrogen cyanide remarkable was this contradiction. It was light as mist, volatile enough to vanish into the air, yet it could disrupt cellular respiration faster than any known poison of its time. Scientists were astonished and unsettled. A nearly instantaneous poison, born from a pigment used widely across European art. The thought alone shook the scientific community. From this moment onward, the story of Prussian Blue was no longer the story of art. It crossed into the realm of chemistry, and from chemistry, it stepped directly into the history of humankind. The emergence of hydrogen cyanide opened an entirely new world. It became proof that knowledge could uncover things far beyond human senses: a faint vapor, a tiny molecule, a delicate scent, yet carrying the power to destroy life. HCN was the essence of purity and danger. It was colorless, unshowy, leaving almost no trace. But it could take away the most precious thing, life, so quickly that the boundary between living and dying seemed to dissolve. And because of this, hydrogen cyanide became the center of a scientific revolution. It forced chemists to rebuild their understanding of toxins. It pushed them to create new language, new concepts, new tools to describe and handle this invisible danger. From here, the foundations of modern toxicology began to take shape. If Prussian Blue was the doorway into the story, then hydrogen cyanide was the first corridor humanity had to walk through before entering the darkest chapters of history. This was not merely the birth of a poison, it was the birth of a symbol. But to understand why HCN became so fearsome, we must look at its nature. A molecule of carbon bonded to a molecule of nitrogen by a triple bond, one of the strongest bonds in chemistry. This structure granted cyanide an unusual stability: small, compact, agile, able to slip into every corner of a living body. It needed only an instant to enter a cell, seek out the enzyme cytochrome C oxidase, and shut down cellular respiration. After that, the human body sank into a deep, suffocating silence, the silence of cells no longer producing energy, the silence of life locked from within. The mechanism was too fast, too clean, too absolute. And from that moment, hydrogen cyanide became a tool history would wield many times, in industry, in warfare, in interrogation chambers, in private moments of last resort. But before all those horrors unfolded, it was simply a discovery in a laboratory, a clear liquid in a glass vial, resting quietly on a scientist's table. The birth of HCN revealed a profound truth: science does not only uncover beauty. It also uncovers shadows. And sometimes, those shadows are born from the most beautiful things. In many ways, Scheele and his contemporaries opened an entirely new chapter for human history, one in which color, molecules, and death intertwined. They never intended to create the world's most notorious poison. They were simply following curiosity. But science is like that: once the door of knowledge opens, no one can know whether light or darkness lies beyond. As Part 2 draws to a close, we stand at the threshold of a sobering truth: cyanide has left the laboratory. It will enter industry, battlefields, and the quiet rooms where people confront their final decisions. And to fully understand cyanide's journey through the modern world, we will step into the next chapter, where cyanide is no longer just a molecule, but a double-edged blade of chemistry, creating materials, products, and technologies, while bringing danger to anyone who touches it. Let us continue. For cyanide still holds many secrets yet to be told. Even so, the journey of cyanide does not end at the moment it was born in a laboratory and stepped into the world. If the previous part allowed us to witness the instant when science unintentionally created a chemical carrying both virtue and danger, then now, another door opens, a place where the true nature of cyanide is revealed under the light of knowledge. It is the moment when chemists no longer see a poison, but see its structure, its power, and the mechanism that drives it, the very thing that made cyanide a legend in both science and history. To truly understand why cyanide became a century-spanning terror, we must enter the invisible world of molecules, where every secret is hidden inside tiny bonds that seem harmless at first glance. Cyanide is not terrifying merely because of how quickly it kills. It is frightening because of the elegant precision of its structure, a perfection so compact that it slips into the body like a whisper, stealing life away with a single accurate strike at the heart of existence, oxygen. In the late 18th century and into the 19th, as chemistry began to flourish, researchers discovered that Prussian blue, the pigment that began this entire journey, contained a special group of atoms. It was a bond between carbon and nitrogen, two elements so familiar, yet when bound together in the form of CN, they became the origin of one of the deadliest substances humankind has ever known. This pair is like two artists of opposite temperament, carbon, flexible and fluid, nitrogen, sharp and unyielding. When combined, they form a molecular bow, ready to release an invisible arrow into the core of the cellular respiratory system. What makes cyanide unique and terrifying is its ability to bind precisely to a crucial enzyme in the body's energy-producing process, cytochrome C oxidase. This enzyme performs the final step in converting oxygen into ATP, the energy that sustains life. You can imagine cytochrome C oxidase as the final doorway through which oxygen enters the power plant within every cell. But when cyanide appears, it locks that door shut. It doesn't need to harm the heart or lungs directly, cyanide simply prevents cells from using oxygen. And the body, though breathing normally, collapses into a state of internal suffocation. This silent attack is what made cyanide the perfect choice for spies, assassins, and power-hungry manipulators throughout history. A poison without noticeable smell, color, or taste, a chemical that dissolves quickly inside the body and disappears almost without a trace. In an age of primitive forensic tools, cyanide was nearly a perfect weapon, silent, immediate, and elusive. Before forensic science matured, cyanide deaths were often mistaken for heart failure or suffocation. It was a killer without knives, without sound, leaving behind only a faint almond-like scent, an aroma that not everyone can even perceive. Yet, it was precisely its danger that made scientists eager to understand it more deeply. Studying cyanide was not merely about measuring its toxicity. It unveiled important discoveries about chemical bonding, molecular stability, and biological interactions. Chemists realized that the bond between carbon and nitrogen in the cyanide ion is one of the strongest found in nature. Its linear, compact structure allows it to travel quickly through the body, entering cells within seconds. A tiny molecule, yet possessing a swiftness and potency that few other poisons can rival. From here, laboratories began measuring cyanide's toxicity through the concept of LD5, the dose capable of killing 50% of test subjects. And the results were chilling, just a few milligrams of cyanide could end the life of an adult. Its potency exceeds that of many common poisons by dozens of times. It needs very little, just a small mistake, a single careless drop, to create tragedy. But ironically, the deeper scientists studied cyanide, the more they realized it was not merely a bringer of death. Its simple yet powerful structure makes it an essential key in many chemical synthesis reactions. In industry, cyanide is used to extract gold from ore, manufacture acrylic plastics, produce dyes, and create countless other modern materials. A deadly poison, yet also a foundational brick in the industries that help the world grow. This contradiction only strengthens cyanide's role as a symbol of duality, both a cold-blooded killer and an unsung hero of chemistry. And it is this duality that keeps humanity endlessly curious, endlessly questioning, how can a molecule so simple wield such enormous influence over the world? As the 19th century passed, our understanding of cyanide structure and mechanisms laid crucial foundations for forensic science, industry, and medicine. Chemists realized that one cannot judge cyanide through morality or history alone. To understand it, one must see through the lens of science, neutral, sharp, and deeply inquisitive. And the more we understand, the clearer we see the fragile line between creation and destruction. The structure, power, and peril of cyanide have shaped not only dark chapters of history, but also the entire landscape of modern chemistry. It is proof that sometimes, the most frightening things are not the largest demons, but the smallest molecules, invisible units capable of altering human fate. And the journey of cyanide still does not end here. Once humanity understood its structure, we began to imagine how it moves inside the body. For to defend against an invisible enemy, we must understand how it strikes. That is the doorway leading us to the next chapter, where science unravels the toxic mechanism of cyanide, revealing the moment a tiny molecule extinguishes life in just a few minutes. And when we have understood the structure, the power, and the danger of cyanide, when the invisible veil surrounding that tiny molecule is drawn aside, another paradox becomes clearer than ever. The more we recognize it as a fearsome killer, the more humanity relies on it to build new industries. For history, at times, operates through paradoxes. A deadly poison becomes the foundation of progress. And it is precisely at this moment that cyanide steps into the next chapter of its journey, a chapter with the scope and significance of an entire modern economy. To understand why cyanide became one of the most important compounds of the industrial era, we must turn back to the late 19th century. By then, chemists had grasped the properties, the structure, and the mechanism of cyanide. To the industrial world, it was no longer merely a danger, but a tool, a powerful instrument capable of opening new doors and accelerating the spread of industrialization across Europe and North America. Cyanide became a critical link in humanity's transition from agrarian societies to industrial ones, societies shaped by machines, metallurgy, and resource extraction. It all began with an invention that transformed the mining industry: the cyanidation process. In the early 1880s, the chemist brothers MacArthur and Forrest successfully developed a method to extract gold from ore using a cyanide solution. This breakthrough was so revolutionary that it almost immediately reshaped the entire gold mining industry worldwide. Before this, gold extraction relied mainly on mercury, a toxic, inefficient method with severe environmental consequences. Cyanide, with its extraordinary ability to dissolve gold, made extraction cheaper, faster, and far more productive. The irony is striking: a substance capable of ending a human life in minutes enabled humanity to extract one of the planet's most precious metals with unprecedented ease. Thanks to cyanide, massive gold mines from South Africa to Australia entered the age of industrial-scale production. Huge ore-crushing machines ran day and night. Cyanide solution ponds stretched across landscapes like chemical fields, and trains loaded with gold rolled ceaselessly, contributing to national treasuries and the rise of new economies. Behind all these movements, cyanide quietly played the starring role. But mining was only one part of the story. Cyanide also permeated unexpected fields, areas few would imagine a deadly poison could dominate. In organic industry, cyanide became a key ingredient in the production of countless base compounds, such as acrylonitrile, which was used to create acrylic plastics, one of the most ubiquitous and influential plastics of the 20th century. Acrylic appeared in airplane windows, signage, shatterproof materials, and even interior decorations. Once again, a toxic molecule stood behind the everyday items of modern life. It did not stop there. Cyanide was employed in the manufacture of dyes, plastics, synthetic rubber, and even pharmaceuticals. As science advanced, researchers discovered that with subtle adjustments, cyanide derivatives could become essential links in synthesizing new drugs. Organic chemistry, through creativity and careful control, transformed a molecule once notorious in assassination stories into the foundation for life-serving products. Yet, this development did not always come without cost. Cyanide, no matter how carefully controlled or applied, has always been a double-edged sword. Environmental disasters occurred when management was lax. Cyanide solution ponds sometimes ruptured, releasing lethal streams that killed fish and aquatic life by the thousands. High-profile incidents, from Romania to Ghana, forced nations to reconsider the use of cyanide in mining. Cyanide can create wealth, but in the hands of the careless, it can also unleash catastrophe. And this marks a critical juncture in the poison's journey. From a purely chemical discovery, cyanide became the foundation of industrial prosperity, yet simultaneously demanded that humanity confront ethical and environmental responsibility. In many modern industries, cyanide still holds a central role. You may not see it as you walk down an asphalt road, touch an acrylic billboard, or wear a piece of gold jewelry. Yet beneath those objects lie traces of a long journey, beginning with the blue of Prussian Blue, continuing through daring laboratory experiments, and culminating in the global rise of industrial production. Behind every finished product, every new technology, every modern industry, there is cyanide, a tiny molecule with the power to reshape economic history. It exemplifies that science never exists apart from society. A substance that can both save and destroy, create value, yet cause loss. All depending on how humanity wields it. And it is precisely this duality that makes cyanide remarkable. It does not merely exist as a chemical, but as proof of human creativity, and human error. Observing cyanide's role in industry reveals the fragile balance between progress and destruction. It shows the boundless ambition of humans in exploiting nature. And it offers the lesson that every advance carries responsibility. As cyanide became the foundation for an industrial age, humanity turned a new page in history, a page of development, prosperity, but also warning. The more the world relied on cyanide, the more it had to learn to handle it with utmost care. A single mistake could cost entire ecosystems. A moment of greed could devastate the environment. Yet cyanide's journey did not end there. Once it became an industrial cornerstone, the world began to face the next challenge. Regulation, monitoring, and the creation of safety standards to protect humans from the very tool they had created. This was when the story shifted toward darker corners of history, where cyanide was not just an industrial agent, but twisted into a tool of war, crime, and human tragedy. And that is the doorway leading us to the next chapter, when cyanide leaves the factory and steps into the blood-soaked pages of the 20th century. When cyanide had stepped out of the laboratory and become a critical tool in industrial sectors, it was no longer something abstract or distant. Factories, gold mines, and chemical plants stood as living evidence of its dual nature, creating wealth while spreading danger. Yet, as if guided by the hand of fate, the next stage of cyanide's journey no longer unfolded in production lines or laboratories, but in the dark corners of human history, where this poison began to play a role in some of the most tragic chapters of the 20th century. At the dawn of the 20th century, hydrogen cyanide was still perceived through the lens of science and practical application. With its antibacterial and disinfectant properties, it became a vital tool for preserving goods, sanitizing ships, and even in hospitals. In industrial and medical contexts, cyanide was hailed as a silent guardian, helping to prevent disease and protect human assets. At that time, no one imagined that this small, pure chemical could transform into a symbol of crime and human tragedy. Yet history spares no one, and cyanide was no exception. In the early 1940s, Nazi Germany turned hydrogen cyanide into Zyklon B, a mass murder weapon at concentration camps. This horrifying transformation highlighted not only cyanide's immediate lethality but also revealed a deeper terror. Science could be twisted into an instrument of destruction when power, politics, and greed took hold. Zyklon B became the embodiment of a system that had industrialized death. This was no longer a poison used in experiments or medicine, but a product developed, distributed, and operated according to industrial protocols, where every individual, from manufacturer, engineer, merchant, and official to the operator, became a cog in a ruthless machine. Cyanide, once created to serve human benefit, now reflected the corruption of ethics, the manipulation of power, and systematized fear. The horror of cyanide in this period lay not only in its biochemical mechanism but in how humans used, organized, and controlled this seemingly neutral chemical. Within minutes, cyanide could erase thousands of lives, but the true terror resided in the rationalization, planning, and execution of mass death as an industrial process. It revealed that sometimes danger does not stem from the poison itself, but from the human capacity to transform it into a tool of power and domination. Cyanide did not remain confined to concentration camps. It appeared in individual murders, political conspiracies, and acts of torture. Toxicologists and forensic scientists noted that, with its ability to vanish quickly, cyanide was the ideal substance for assassinations without leaving traces. It became a perfect weapon in the hands of the powerful or conspiratorial groups, where death occurred in silence, barely noticed, and consequences became evident only when it was too late. Yet cyanide's haunting influence extended beyond its lethality. It left a deep psychological mark, creating a lingering fear in communities and cultures. When people heard about cyanide, they no longer thought of Prussian Blue or laboratory experiments. They thought of instantaneous death, of silence, of the fragile thread of life. And this fear became part of the collective memory, a shadow cast by cyanide across human history. Historians and toxicologists observe that this shadow transcends nations or eras. Cyanide became a global symbol of the horrors of mass death, of humanity's ability to turn scientific knowledge into instruments of destruction. It raises profound ethical questions. Do humans have the right to control and apply knowledge to kill, when justified by politics or national interest? The terrifying reality is that cyanide does not discriminate among its victims. It is a tiny yet omnipotent molecule, capable of extinguishing life with equal efficiency. From European concentration camps to political or religious assassinations, cyanide demonstrated that the real danger lies in the combination of knowledge, technology, and malicious intent. A neutral chemical, placed in the hands of corrupted minds, can become the source of unimaginable tragedy. Yet cyanide also imparts an essential lesson. All knowledge, no matter how powerful, can be misused if detached from ethics and responsibility. Historically, its journey from disinfection to genocide painfully illustrates that humans are the decisive agents, tools are only instruments. Cyanide is not evil, but in the hands of those who manipulate power, it becomes unimaginably ruthless. As Part 5 concludes, we realize that the journey of cyanide is not merely a story about a chemical. It is a story about human nature. About power, ambition, fear, and the capacity to turn knowledge into instruments of destruction. When cyanide stepped from laboratories into the dark corridors of history, it was no longer an inert chemical. It became a symbol of historical darkness, reminding us that life is fragile, and science, no matter how brilliant, can become shadow if divorced from morality. From here, the story of cyanide continues, but now into the realm of personal decisions in the shadows of power, where it did not merely annihilate thousands, but also became the escape ticket for tyrants when their rule collapsed. This opens the doorway to the next chapter, when cyanide transforms into the ultimate instrument of absolute power in the hands of despots and agents of personal violence. When the shadows of history had stained the tragic chapters of humanity, cyanide no longer appeared merely as a tool of collective power. It entered the intensely personal, sorrowful moments of dictators and tyrants, those who once believed their authority was untouchable. From a weapon of mass murder, cyanide transformed into a mirror reflecting collapse, where choosing death became the final act for those who had manipulated millions of lives. For those who once held supreme power, death was no longer a distant possibility, it became the ultimate authority, and cyanide the perfect instrument to wield that authority. As Adolf Hitler's Third Reich teetered on the edge of collapse, it was in the dark Berlin bunkers that cyanide became the final savior for these dictators. Hitler, Eva Braun, Himmler, Göring, Rommel, each understood that a single capsule could provide the last measure of control absent from a crumbling world. In this context, cyanide ceased to be a mere chemical, a lifeless molecule. It became the symbol of absolute power, where death was not failure but a deliberate choice. One crushed capsule, one halted breath, and the dictator left the world on their own terms, retaining a final fragment of control. This act sent a powerful message: even when everything else is stripped away, humans can still command the ultimate decision over their own fate. Yet cyanide also bore witness to human frailty and panic. Not every capsule functioned perfectly, and not everyone succeeded in using it to end their life. Himmler, in his suicide attempt, had to employ multiple methods to ensure death. Göring, seeking to avoid hanging at Nuremberg, turned to the capsule clandestinely, emphasizing that this tool was the final escape from feared justice. Rommel's story added another layer of complexity. Compelled to commit suicide to protect his family and reputation, he also chose cyanide as a means to retain a final measure of personal power. Each case demonstrated that cyanide was more than chemistry; it was a symbol of despair, control, and personal authority at the moment the outside world collapsed. Moreover, its presence in these moments reveals a profound paradox: what had once been used to annihilate millions now became a personal salvation. A molecule that inspired fear across nations now served only a few individuals, granting them ultimate power over their own mortality. It painfully illustrates how chemical power and human agency can intersect, producing decisions that are both tragic and heroic. Cyanide in the hands of dictators also conveys a lethal philosophy of power: when one no longer controls the world, one seeks control over one's own death. It is no longer a tool to destroy others, but the ultimate expression of self-determination, a weapon of freedom, of a dark, yet potent kind. Simultaneously, this story raises ethical and psychological questions. Why did these humans choose cyanide instead of facing historical accountability? Why did a substance that had instilled terror in millions become a tool of liberation for those who caused that very terror? The answer lies in the nature of power. At its peak, it produces profound fear, and cyanide becomes a means to soothe it, the final instrument to retain power, even if only over one's own life. From a historical perspective, cyanide has long symbolized absolute contrasts: mass destruction versus personal suicide, collective horror versus individual control, neutral science versus corrupted ethics. It shows that, regardless of how humans wield it, its power never diminishes, and its capacity to create tragedy always lurks, awaiting the right moment. Furthermore, the saga of cyanide and dictators teaches a lesson about history and humanity. It reminds us that tools, no matter how powerful, are only instruments; the user determines their consequence. The cyanide capsules in the Berlin bunker stand as living testimony that scientific knowledge, placed in the hands of those devoid of ethics, can become the final symbol of power, simultaneously destroying the self while leaving a bitter reminder for posterity about the value of morality, control, and personal responsibility. Through the pages of dictators' histories, cyanide demonstrates the potency of personal choice in the shadows of power. A tiny molecule that once instilled fear in millions now becomes the instrument to maintain the ultimate authority of the self, a power that no law, soldier, or force can revoke. And from here, the story opens into a next chapter no less compelling, when cyanide is no longer only the personal tool of tyrants, but becomes the inseparable companion of spies, a symbol of absolute loyalty and silence in the underworld, where lives and secrets hang in delicate balance. This is the doorway to the next part, where cyanide steps into the world of espionage, legendary, tragic, and an emblem of silent power. When dictators turn to cyanide as their ultimate authority in moments of collapse, the poison seemed to transcend the bounds of political history, becoming a symbol of personal power, the final, irrevocable choice. Yet cyanide did not remain confined to the dark bunkers of Berlin or the desperate moments of those in power. As the world entered the era of modern warfare and spies became pivotal pawns in international intrigue, cyanide once again found a new role, this time as an inseparable companion, a symbol of absolute silence and unshakable loyalty. In the shadowy realm of intelligence agencies like the SOE, OSS, Gestapo, or KGB, cyanide was more than a chemical. It was the final shield against torture, the ultimate pledge of loyalty, the tool ensuring that vital secrets stayed hidden at all costs. A tiny, nearly invisible cyanide capsule contained enough power to safeguard life, preserve information, and prevent national secrets from falling into enemy hands. For spies, the cyanide pill was standard issue, a silent instrument. In times of war or high-risk missions, a single bite, a single breath, could prevent crucial information from being revealed. Cyanide became a symbol of supreme control. Even when captured or tortured, agents could determine their fate and maintain secrets no one could predict. But the life of a spy was never perfect. Though engineered to perfection, cyanide pills had terrifying limitations. In moments of panic, under extreme pressure, not every agent could use them correctly. Failures sometimes led to painful, incomplete deaths. At times, cyanide did not grant escape but added to the horror. This fragility created a tragic layer in the spy legend. Cyanide was simultaneously power and risk, symbol and peril. The legend of cyanide in espionage was inseparable from trust and absolute loyalty. The pill not only protected secrets but embodied a moral code: I am willing to die, but I will not betray information. During World War II and the Cold War, when a single piece of intelligence could change the world's balance, cyanide became a guarantee of trust, the agency's trust in its agent and the agent's trust in their mission. Though small, its mere presence could instill fear in adversaries. In this way, cyanide became the third character in every spy plot, a silent yet commanding presence. It did not give orders, fight, or intervene directly, yet its existence altered how agents acted, how enemies predicted moves, and how secrets were protected. Its power lay not in attack but in psychological influence, creating absolute silence, where fear became both tool and shield. The use of cyanide also reflected the industrialization of death within intelligence organizations. Pills were mass-produced, quality-controlled, and packaged to exact standards, demonstrating how science and technology could transform a lethal chemical into a strategic instrument, where every molecule was calculated to ensure mission security while protecting lives. In the hands of spies, cyanide showed that chemical power, when paired with strategy and psychology, could create extraordinary authority, a power of the shadows, the authority of silence. Yet, as with historical events before, cyanide in espionage was not infallible. Pills could fail, plans could falter, and tragedies could occur instead of salvation. Tales of cyanide malfunctioning, of tortured agents surviving, or of unintended consequences create a quietly tragic layer in its mythology, reminding us that, no matter the sophistication of science, human fragility and the illusion of perfect tools always remain. Cyanide also carried deep symbolic meaning. It represented the boundary between life and death, loyalty and betrayal, personal power and organizational duty. A single pill could alter not just an individual's fate, but that of a mission, a conspiracy, or even a nation. Viewed in this light, cyanide was more than a chemical, it was a decisive agent, whose presence or absence could reshape the shadowy world of espionage. Ultimately, Part 7 shows cyanide, despite its size, has always been present in critical human decisions. It is a bridge between scientific knowledge, personal power, and international strategy. Within each pill, each breath, each moment of choice, cyanide reminds us that life and secrets can be preserved or taken with a single molecule, a single bite. From here, cyanide's story enters a new chapter. When it leaves the battlefield and the intelligence world to infiltrate civilian life, where its power and danger become starkly visible and unpredictable. From Jonestown to the Tylenol incidents, cyanide proves that whether used in war, espionage, or personal schemes, the true danger always lies in its presence in human hands, and the lesson of how we confront such power is far from over. When cyanide had become an inseparable part of the world of spies, a symbol of silence, loyalty, and ultimate control, one might have assumed its power was confined to high-stakes intelligence missions or the desperate final moments of dictators. Yet history shows that cyanide can penetrate civilian life, where it is no longer a symbol of authority or loyalty, but a present danger, descending upon innocent communities, shattering trust and social order. From the clandestine world of espionage, cyanide stepped straight into tragedies where ordinary people became victims, making the terror of the poison all the more immediate and horrifying. The Jonestown tragedy of 1978 is one of the most painful examples of cyanide entering civilian life. Over 900 men, women, and children were coerced into drinking cyanide-laced beverages in an event disguised as a mass suicide orchestrated by the People's Temple cult. The horror lay not only in the instantaneous deaths but in the psychological manipulation and absolute control wielded by one individual, which coldly claimed hundreds of lives. In the hands of Jim Jones and his cult, cyanide became the ultimate instrument that transformed faith, devotion, and dependence into lethal tragedy. It was no longer a laboratory chemical or a pill in a bunker, it was a subtle weapon of manipulation, where belief itself was converted into death. Looking closely at Jonestown, we see cyanide's dual nature. It was both a physical destructive agent and a psychological tool, where fear, authority, and mental manipulation combined to create mass death. The residents, isolated and brainwashed, had no capacity to resist. Cyanide merely acted as a catalyst, making the cult leader's absolute power terrifyingly tangible. This is a stark lesson in how power and belief can transform a chemical into a tool of mass murder, showing that cyanide's potency lies not in its chemistry alone, but in the way humans wield it. Shortly after Jonestown, in 1982, cyanide appeared in a very different context, the Tylenol murders in Chicago. This time, the victims were ordinary people, relying on everyday products. An unknown individual laced Tylenol capsules with cyanide, killing 7 and sending panic through the United States. This incident revealed the hidden dangers lurking in familiar objects, forcing the pharmaceutical industry to redefine safety standards. Tamper-evident packaging became the norm, and quality control protocols were significantly strengthened. The contrast between Jonestown and the Tylenol case illustrates cyanide's terrifying versatility. On one side was a tragedy orchestrated by a human with absolute power and psychological manipulation, on the other, an unexpected attack on civilian society, where anyone could become a victim. In both cases, cyanide proves that its danger lies not only in the chemical itself but in the abuse of power, negligence, and human greed. A single misstep, a single molecule misplaced, could shatter trust, safety, and lives. These tragedies also highlight the fragility of trust and community safeguards. Jonestown demonstrates how an isolated society, when placing boundless faith in one leader, can become a victim of cyanide. Tylenol shows that in modern society, faith in everyday products does not guarantee absolute safety. Cyanide, though small, becomes a symbol of human helplessness when facing an invisible, unpredictable threat. Notably, both incidents reveal cyanide's quiet but formidable characteristic, its ability to vanish quickly, leaving almost no immediate trace. This made tracking the perpetrators, understanding the phenomenon, and implementing preventive measures extremely difficult. In Jonestown, cyanide turned an entire community into a moment of simultaneous death. In the Tylenol case, it transformed ordinary bottles into unseen threats, shaking confidence in healthcare systems and consumer products alike. Both tragedies underscore that cyanide reflects human behavior. It is not inherently evil. It becomes deadly only when humans wield it for power, greed, or destructive purposes. Its power, therefore, lies not only in immediate lethality but in forcing society to confront the value of trust, safety, and collective responsibility. At the same time, these events demonstrate the multidimensional nature of human tragedy. From Jonestown, we learn that religion, belief, and psychological manipulation can transform a chemical into a weapon. From Tylenol, we see that even a modern, advanced society can fall victim to wrongdoing and danger from a tiny molecule. Cyanide becomes a bridge between science, ethics, and the fragility of social order. Part 8 closes with a clear message: cyanide is not just a chemical, it is a mirror reflecting human greed, power, manipulation, and vulnerability. It transforms poor decisions, misguided beliefs, and malevolent actions into real-life tragedies, demanding that history remember them. From here, the story opens a new chapter, when cyanide moves beyond civilian attacks to challenge forensic science itself, becoming a cunning adversary in the pursuit of truth, a test of human intellect in detecting, proving, and countering an invisible yet powerful assassin. When cyanide had inflicted tragic civilian disasters, from Jonestown to the Tylenol murders, it left behind more than instantaneous deaths, it presented a formidable challenge for justice and forensic science. Unlike many other chemicals, cyanide possesses the ability to vanish almost completely, erasing its traces after completing its task. These civilian events demonstrated that cyanide's power does not lie solely in lethality, but also in its elusiveness, making both victims and investigators pawns of time and molecules. This very characteristic forced forensic experts, guardians of justice, to confront an invisible and sophisticated adversary. In the realm of forensics, cyanide is a uniquely daunting challenge. Unlike other poisons that leave long-lasting evidence, cyanide evaporates quickly, infiltrates the body, and almost entirely disappears even before investigators can reach the scene. This creates a race against time, in which forensic scientists must marshal every skill, bit of knowledge, and technological resource to track the faintest traces. In this way, cyanide becomes an invisible killer. Not only destroying lives but also testing human intellect in the pursuit of truth. Detecting cyanide in a victim's body demands precision and patience. Forensic scientists have developed a variety of methods, colorimetric tests based on the formation of Prussian Blue, gas chromatography (GC/MS) to trap cyanide vapors, thiocyanate assays in blood, and advanced techniques like HPLC or ion chromatography. Each method reflects human creativity and relentless determination to pursue justice, yet also serves as a reminder that cyanide always stays a step ahead, turning investigations into a cat-and-mouse game between humans and molecules. The greatest difficulty lies in cyanide's lack of clear traces at crime scenes, leaving investigators feeling helpless. In many cases, by the time forensics arrive, the cyanide vapor has dissipated, the victim has died, and only indirect clues remain. A fleeting almond-like odor, transient biological symptoms, or cellular changes not yet fully degraded. Each fragile sign requires the forensic scientist to combine science, experience, and intuition to reconstruct the truth from the fragments left behind. Notably, cyanide is challenging not only technically but also philosophically and ethically. When a victim dies and the evidence almost completely vanishes, justice seems delayed, leaving families and communities to face the double agony of death and ambiguity. Cyanide, by disappearing after claiming lives, is not just a physical killer but also a sower of uncertainty regarding transparency, justice, and accountability. It raises profound questions about humanity's ability to control what it has created. In confronting cyanide, forensics are also battling time and environmental conditions. Cyanide evaporates, permeates surrounding materials, reacts with the environment, and even transforms into other compounds before detection is possible. This struggle requires perfect coordination between chemical theory, clinical practice, and analytical technique, turning forensic work into an exploration of the invisible world of toxic molecules. Every case is a new journey, every victim a new challenge, with cyanide always looming as a cunning and elusive adversary. Moreover, cyanide exposes the limits of human knowledge. No matter how advanced technology becomes, 100% detection is never guaranteed. These failures underscore a harsh truth: chemical power, when used to kill, can surpass even modern science. Cyanide may vanish, but its consequences, pain, death, and horror, remain, leaving an indelible mark on humanity. Another aspect worth noting is that cyanide also drives the advancement of forensic science. Difficult cases have compelled the field to continually refine techniques, invent new methods, and study in greater depth how toxins affect the body and environment. In this sense, cyanide becomes an indirect tool promoting scientific progress, a killer, but also a silent teacher, instructing humanity in caution, precision, and creativity in the pursuit of truth. The battle against cyanide also opens a deeply human perspective. Facing a toxin that can vanish entirely, forensic scientists fight not only for science but also for victims, for justice, and for their families. It demonstrates that in the modern world, justice is not merely finding a perpetrator but also combating ambiguity, disappearance, and invisibility, where knowledge, skill, and patience are weighed against human life. Part 9 concludes with an important emphasis. Cyanide is not only an invisible killer inside the body but also a challenge to human intellect, ethics, and legal systems. Each case is a lesson in the fragility of justice in the face of molecular power, and in how science must continually strive to keep pace with the dangers humanity has created. From here, the story moves into Part 10, where cyanide enters the fields of medicine and antidotes, allowing humanity not only to detect it but also to save lives, proving that chemical power is only dangerous when misused, and ultimately, humans remain the ones who decide cyanide's fate. When cyanide had demonstrated its devastating power on battlefields, in espionage plots, and even in civilian life, as well as becoming a challenge for forensic intelligence, the final question arises. Can humans transform this invisible killer into a tool for saving lives, rather than a source of disaster? Part 9 concluded with images of forensic scientists relentlessly striving to detect cyanide, demonstrating that science is always striving to keep pace with the sophistication of death. Part 10 opens a turning point. From detection and tracing, humanity learns to control, reverse, and save, turning cyanide from a symbol of death into an opportunity for learning, treatment, and rescue. Within the human body, cyanide operates with frightening precision. It attacks the cellular respiratory chain, causing cells to suffocate even in the presence of oxygen. This process occurs rapidly, weakening vital organs from heart to brain within minutes. This is why cyanide is a perfect killer, fast, hard to detect, and nearly symptomless until its consequences strike. Yet it is precisely this danger that drives medical innovation, where scientists and doctors develop antidotes, gradually transforming an invisible deathbringer into an opportunity to save lives. Classical antidotes such as amyl nitrite, which produces methemoglobin to bind cyanide, or sodium thiosulfate, which converts cyanide into the less toxic thiocyanate, represent pioneering steps in efforts to save victims. These techniques are not only proof of biochemical understanding but also reflect human will to overcome death, to reverse the harm once experienced by individuals or society. With modern medicine, methods like hydroxycobalamin, specialized vitamin B12, have emerged as effective and safer solutions, showing that science can turn a molecule once synonymous with death into a life-saving agent. The key insight is that cyanide is not inherently evil. Rather, the way humans use it determines its moral value. History has recorded the most harrowing moments, from dictators to civilian tragedies, but there are also moments when humans triumph over death through knowledge and technique. Cyanide thus becomes a mirror reflecting human choice. It can be used to kill, manipulate, protect secrets, or save lives, all depending on human action and responsibility. The most profound lesson from Part 10 is choice and accountability. Cyanide is merely a tool. Humans are the ones who decide its fate and the consequences it brings. When used to save life, it reflects the power of knowledge and ethics. When misused to kill, it exposes cruelty and error. In medicine, cyanide becomes a symbol of controlled power, where understanding, skill, and responsibility intersect, determining the line between life and death. Moreover, cyanide in medicine teaches humans the value of time, knowledge, and collaboration. A cyanide victim requires rapid, precise, and effective intervention. Each passing minute decreases the chance of survival while placing doctors and scientists under urgent pressure. This demonstrates that science, time, and skill are inseparable, and that saving a life is not just an individual effort but the product of a perfectly coordinated system. Cyanide also reminds us that power is never neutral. In medicine, the power of chemical knowledge is used to rescue victims, yet the same knowledge, if applied maliciously, becomes catastrophic. The difference lies in human choice. This is the ultimate lesson: cyanide is not the villain, humans decide its fate, directing scientific and ethical power toward good or evil. Looking back at the full journey of cyanide. From Prussian Blue in Berlin dye workshops, through chemical experiments, mining applications, historical tragedies, espionage, civilian incidents, forensics, and medicine, one fact becomes clear: every cyanide molecule is a challenge to humanity, to choose how it will be used and to learn from the consequences. Cyanide has traversed all layers of history, from the aesthetic beauty of art to tragedy and life-saving science, yet throughout, the message remains consistent. Power does not determine good or evil on its own, humans decide its destiny. Part 10 not only concludes the history of cyanide but also presents the ultimate human lesson: knowledge and power must be accompanied by responsibility, wisdom, and ethics. Cyanide can be an absolute killer if humans choose wrongly, but it can also be a remarkable life-saving tool if humans act wisely. This is a powerful message for anyone following cyanide's extraordinary journey. History, science, and morality intersect, and human choice shapes the final outcome. From this lesson, we extract a profound truth: chemical power, scientific knowledge, or any tool in life is neutral. Good or evil depends entirely on us, the humans who wield and are accountable for it. Cyanide teaches us that in all actions, from the smallest to the greatest, humans are the arbiters of power, and therefore bear responsibility for all consequences that power produces. When the long and tumultuous journey of cyanide comes to an end, from the harmless blue dyes in Berlin's workshops, to chemical experiments unveiling the mysteries of hydrogen cyanide, to a tool for gold extraction, a killer in the hands of dictators, a symbol of loyalty in the world of spies, the cause of civilian tragedies, a challenge to forensic intelligence, and finally, a tool for saving lives in medicine, one message becomes crystal clear: cyanide is not evil. People are the ones who are good or bad. Cyanide is a neutral molecule, unaware of morality or immorality. Every death, every fear, every devastation, or every act of saving a life reflects human choice, the way we wield knowledge and power. From dictators, spies, cult leaders, to those who tamper with consumer products, cyanide becomes the most honest mirror of human nature: power, ambition, manipulation, creativity, compassion, and intellect. The message is powerful. We cannot blame the tool or the molecule. Every consequence reflects the ethical and intellectual choices of humans. When cyanide is used to kill, it exposes cruelty and moral failure. When used in medicine to save lives, it demonstrates creativity, knowledge, and humanity. Cyanide is a mirror of human action, where every decision leaves a trace, and every consequence is evidence of responsibility. From a philosophical perspective, cyanide is a symbol of neutral power, where the value of an action does not lie in the material itself but in the subject wielding it. Each molecule is a challenge: how do we use this power wisely, safely, and responsibly? When a person holds cyanide, or when a society manages it, the question is not, is cyanide good or bad, but rather, how will we choose to use this power? The ultimate message emphasizes that knowledge, tools, and power are meaningless without ethics and responsibility. Cyanide can destroy or save lives, devastate communities, or become the foundation for scientific advancement. The difference lies in human hands and willpower. Throughout history, from Berlin's dye workshops to modern medical laboratories, the message remains consistent: humans determine the value of the tool only reflects human nature. Cyanide stands as living proof that neutral power is only truly dangerous when humans choose to misuse it, and only capable of saving lives when humans act wisely and responsibly. This is a timeless lesson: every tool, every form of power, reflects our choices. Cyanide is not evil, it is neutral, reflecting the good or evil within humans, and it is humans, through knowledge, will, and ethics, who ultimately determine the fate of every power they hold.